Uncle Roddus back again with yet another video on the vinyl stuff that we just can't help but keep buying. So, quite a bit to show. It's been about a month since I made a video. It's been about a month since I posted one actually. I've got a huge backlog of them. I haven't posted a video from this year yet, and it's now August. It is now the second half of August in 2022, and yeah, a bunch of records have been coming in, and a bunch of records yesterday. So we got to go into town for the weekend. We've been looking around the shops for new stuff to do up our house, getting ideas, looking at prices of stuff, what we can afford to do. It's going to be a big job, but we need to get this house brought up to standard, ready for the future. Went to Penny Lane. So my wife showed me a few records actually. And whilst in Penny Lane I came across this record here. Now Dave Liebman, his name was familiar to me, and I realised when I got home and checked up on Discogs that I have two of his records that he released on ECM Records prior to this. But the reason that I picked up this record was because of the inclusion of Mike Knock, which he was featured on guitar, piano. Mike being a someone who I've shown many records of before and talked about several times. He is New Zealand's premier jazz pianist, and this is what is playing in the background if you can hear it behind us. So this is from 1979, this record, and this is it was released on several different labels around the world, and this is the Ode Records, New Zealand Ode Records release from 1979. So that's some nice jazz. So I shall get through the yesterday's pile first, shall we? So Penny Lane, what else did we get from Penny Lane? So I picked up this, finally. I wasn't going to get this at first because, so this is French for rabbits, and this is called The Overflow. Now this is their third record, or third album I believe. I've got their first one, which was vinyl release. The second only came out on cassette and CD I believe, and then third, this one last year. This is from late last year. Now the first album of theirs, to be honest, I hadn't really connected with it a lot. I haven't, but then I did hear a track. Now I can't remember if it was a track off this or a track off the original one, but it kind of clicked with me, and it was really, I kind of got it. So I'm going to give this one a go. And it was called The Overflow. This is kind of droney, dream pop, shoegazy sort of stuff. Also at Penny Lane, I picked up a copy of this. So I haven't got much of these guys' music, but this is a 2013 album, Austerity Dogs. This is the album, I think, before Key Markets, which is the one that I picked up on originally. It's the only one of theirs I have at the moment until I got this one. This is a 2020 reissue, I believe. It says it's on yellow, but to me that looks more like a lime green. So I don't know, unless this is one that's not on Discogs, this colour rendering of it. They called it yellow on the sticker on the shop. So yeah, I believe it's a 2020 reissue. I haven't heard it, but I do like their music. They have been hugely prolific since they put out that Key Markets album, which was 2015 I think it was. So it was one of the early pieces of vinyl that I bought in my collection when I started collecting again. So looking forward to having a listen to that. And then I picked up, finally, for 4 records, I finally picked up this one. It's another New Zealand compilation. These are getting expensive. You used to be able to pick these up for $30, now they're nearly 60. And there was another compilation in another shop that I didn't grab because I was sort of running out of funds. But yeah, I grabbed this. It's called Pagan in a Pagan Land on Pagan Records from 1988, and this is quite a commercial one because all of the songs on here were quite well known around the country. Things like Sex Pistols, The Game of Love, and Shona Lang's Soviet Snow, and the Waratahs, Hand on My Heart. Some good songs there, not the sort of guys that I would go out and buy their records so much, Artie Jar and stuff like that, but yeah, some pretty good songs there. So that goes along with some of the more commercial, successful compilations that I have picked up. But it's a New Zealand compilation, and I am slowly collecting them. There was a Radio Tracks compilation in the shop, which is the first time I'd ever seen one in the wild. I did buy it, but I bought a couple of copies off a guy on Facebook, and it was one of the volumes that I'd already had. So we went into another wee shop that was just around the corner from where we stayed. We spent the night in the city in a motel. We were supposed to go to the Tammy Nielsen gig at the town hall with the CSO, because she was going to do this gig with the Christchurch Symphony Orchestra, playing stuff off her new record, which is a fantastic record. I just showed it a video or two ago. The album is really good. It's probably one of her best, if not her best. It went to #1 in the charts in New Zealand, which isn't saying a hell of a lot, but anyway. Unfortunately, due to COVID, the concert was cancelled. So we went out for dinner. But before we went out for dinner, we were popping up to New Regent Street, which is a really cool wee street with really old buildings, and they managed to survive the earthquake, and they're doing really well. There's some cafes and some ice cream shops and some restaurants and bars and blah blah blah, and some quirky little retail shops, and one of them is a little record shop called the AV Club, and they got records, some CDs and DVDs and comics and various sort of stuff. First time I'd ever been there, I knew I was aware of them, and I'd seen them on Facebook. They had a couple of bins out on the road with some pretty cheap records, and they are cheap because they are a bit scruffy and a bit old, but this is one of them I picked up for $10, and I was pretty pleased. I do have the CD of this. This is a great record that I had back in the day. Landscapes from the tea rooms of Mars to the hellholes of Uranus. There was a guy, there's a New Zealand connection to this record. There was a guy, James Burgess, Richard James Burgess. He lived here in Christchurch, or in my hometown of Christchurch, for a good part of his youth and young adultness, for about 15 years, I believe. He came here as a young man with his family, I believe. Anyway, he was of English extraction originally and went back to England and has been quite successful in the music business. So yeah, this is like got Einstein a Go-Go, and what was the name of that track? Norman Bates. Yeah, this is pretty quirky and very cool. It's a little bit rough and dirty, but it'll clean up, I think, and it'll play okay, so I'm not too worried. Also from that shop, I picked up, a copy of this. This was a sealed copy of the reissue of this Blue Note record, reissued in 2016. Not from the 75th anniversary reissues by the looks of it, because it didn't have any sticker to that effect on it. It's some other reissue thing that was going on back in the day. Says the Jazz 33 and the 3rd RPM vinyl collection. So yeah, I'm not quite sure. Not to be sold separately, so I'm not quite sure what that was. But it was mentioned anyway. So yeah, Dexter Gordon, this is a Blue Note I didn't have, so I'm pleased to grab that. So that was at that little AV Club shop, and this also was in the shop. I think this is brand new. This is the reissue from 2019. Pretty much the artwork is pretty much all intact except for the stuff around the outside. I think you remember it used to have pay no more than whatever the amount was back in the day. I used to have an original of this way back. I love this band. Crass were the very first hardcore political punk band that I got into. One night in my early teens on the late night radio show by Barry Jenkins, who had a big influence on my listening at the time, he played Systematic Death off the absolutely fantastic Penis Envy LP, which I love, is my favourite Crass album. I think Crass is my favourite political punk band. Yeah, so this is looking pretty good. So it says it's remastered. Someone made the comment, a remastered Crass album. It also, but it does say that as it was in the beginning, they remastered it to sound as close to the original or something. It says on the notes, or actually on the remastered by Alex Gordon at Abbey Road Studios as close as possible to the sound of the original release. And I think Penny Rimbaud was involved in that remastering as well. So yeah, I really dig Crass, man. This is the first Crass record I've had on vinyl for many years, because I had most of them back in the early days, which I went when I sold them all off. And then finally from that shop, another one in the bargain bins out the front, and this is this is really. You could say this is a pretty important record in my music life, because for the life of me, and I am totally bewildered for the life of me as to why and how we had a collection of this. But I don't know. My mother we were living on the West Coast with her current husband, who's not my father, his second husband. But at the time they were in together when I was a child, and then they went their separate ways for a while and got back together. Similar story to me and my girlfriend, my wife. This was in the house, and I don't know whether it was part of their family or my family, but I don't know where the hell it came from. But I really loved it. I was about 8 or 9 years old. And I used to play this a lot. With this big console, one of those big console record players, with the lift-up lid and the turntable and the big speakers all built into a big kind of console. And I really like this. I really, really dig this. This is the first record I really ever remember digging. Well, apart from just previously to that, the Solid Gold Hits Volume 7, which I showed in a video recently, which I picked up the whole collection of the Solid Gold Hits series. That was a record that stands out in my memory of having a connection with it. But this is a record I really dig. There's a lot of great songs on here. Can the Can, Glycerine Queen, 48 Crash, Devil Great Drive. I mean, what a bunch of great kind of glam rocky sort of stuff. Susie, of course, has been around. I think she's still out there playing music, I believe. She was in Happy Days. She played as an actress in Happy Days. She was in a fantastic early girl, must have been in one of the original girl rock bands or rockin' bands, garage bands back in the early mid 60s. They had a fantastic song on a compilation I used to have many years ago. So really pleased to grab that. Also just come out is this thing here. So back to the New Zealand drony underground sort of stuff. St. Martin's New World is the name of this record by Luke Wood and Luke Shaw. Now Luke Wood, I've talked about before. He did a collaboration with Bruce Russell, which is really good. Visceral Realists or something it's called. That was really good. This is really good. This is really good drone, twin guitar, underground noisy droney noodlings, and I'm double LP. St. Martin's New World supermarket is down in St. Martin's, and I used to actually live like about half a dozen doors down the road from that for a shortish period of time in the mid-90s, perhaps, I would think, from memory. Now, not last weekend, I think the weekend before. Let me think about this. It must have been the weekend before. I went down to Dunedin for a thing called Zellfest, which now Zell Records is a record label run by a fellow called Arno. And he's I don't think he was born in New Zealand, but he's obviously some sort of European. I haven't never met the guy, and some sort of European background, and he spends a lot of time in Europe, and he actually runs his record label from Europe, but it's mostly releasing New Zealand stuff, and it's called Zell Records. And so anyway, he came back to New Zealand for a bit. I mean, he's probably hadn't been back since COVID, so he's got back here, and he did this fest. So I bought tickets for that quite some time ago. I was going to take my wife down, but unfortunately what happened was we also had tickets for the Delaney Davidson Troy Kingy gig at the Town Hall on the Friday night, and that had been postponed for like 12 months for COVID reasons. Finally, that gig had been rescheduled for the Friday night before I went down to Dunedin. So in the end, it was a rush down there to the gig. It started at about 12 o'clock in the afternoon. By the time I got down there, had lunch, got into the motel, blah, blah, blah. I didn't get there till about 3 o'clock. That's all right. I missed a couple of first bands. Unfortunately, some of the bands had to pull out. There was COVID issues and there was other stuff. And then the guy that was doing the sound, he pulled out, and they had to run around quickly and get another sound system. Overall, the weekend was quite disappointing. The main reason I went down there was because of the reformation of a band called the Alpaca Brothers, whose EP released in 1986 I showed earlier in the year, or last year. It's a fantastic Flying Nun EP. They played a gig, mostly new stuff, only played one song off the EP, which was a little disappointing, and they had only played a pretty short set, which was a little disappointing. There were some good bands I saw. Sea Fog played, they were pretty cool. Some I wasn't that impressed with. The sound quality was pretty bad, unfortunately, so I did get a bit bored with it. I couldn't really hear what they were playing very well, and there's a bit of a wall of noise. Anyway, while I was there, this guy played. I didn't see his set, but this guy played, and he had this record for sale, and I picked this up because it's on Zell Records, and I wanted... there's not a lot of records on Zell, a dozen maybe. So as far as the, was there any 7 inches? I think there may be some 7 inches, but I'm not really interested. I've just got all the albums, and this one helped fill in that missing space. To be honest, this is a solo record. Daryl, just him and a guitar. I've had to listen to it. I'm not overly impressed. This has been around for years, this record, and I've seen it around for you, but obviously it's not selling very well. There seems to be a few copies still floating around, but yeah, I don't know. It's really a completing the set, really, and then to complete the set, this turned up. Now I'm not sure. I don't think it's reissued. I think it's an original issue, but it turned up. This is from 2017, and I missed out on a copy, and I couldn't find any. And then it turned up at Flying Out, so I jumped on this to fill the last hole in my collection of Zell Record stuff. Marineville Penguins Ate My Chips. I do have their first LP. Now, was that on Zell? I think there might have been on a different label, which was about 2011, so there was a big space of time between the two records. I've only had to play with this once, but I really enjoyed it. I think this is a far superior record and far more diverse record than the first one. So yeah, I'm really pleased that I got that. So those two records actually complete all the Zell records. So there are a few New Zealand boutique labels where I do have most of the releases, if not all of them, like Fish Rider. No, not Fish Rider. I do have most of the Fish Rider catalogue, but there's some CDs I don't have and some 7 inches. I do have most of the 112. I have all the albums on 112 records apart from some of the singles. So while I was in Dunedin, I popped across at Port Chalmers. I popped across the road to a little art shop. And the art shop is actually owned and run by Robert Scott of the Bats and the Clean, who's a huge legend in New Zealand music. And the Bats were supposed to play last week at a thing called Hellzapoppin', which was a Flying Nun gig to celebrate the Flying Nun 40th anniversary, which was last year, which I talked about in some videos and the display and blah 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 they had. Unfortunately, their drummer broke his foot, so they had to pull out of that. So Hellzapoppin' gig did go ahead finally after another year of delays last weekend on Friday night. That was a really good gig. The Mermaidens and Die played. I hadn't seen them play before. Showed their new LP recently. They were fantastic. They're very heavy, dark, alternative rock and punk sometimes. Earlier they were more punky, but they've gone a lot darker. And the Mermaidens were just fantastic. And they played a lot of new music off their forthcoming LP. And It's a great sound system. Compared to the week before, the sound was so much better, even though it was in this big echoey auditorium at the Art Centre, but it was absolutely awesome. And you know, the thing I like about the Mermaid is that they write beautiful, quirky indie pop songs. They do rock out. Gussie Larkin, the lead player, the guitarist, her guitar lines are so crisp and clear and easy to hear. Yeah, they are a really great live band, really great band, love them to bits. Anyway, getting sidetracked, so back to Bob Scott's little art shop in Port Chalmers in Dunedin. He has a bin of records, and most of the records I knew and had. There's a few clean records and a few of his solo records, and a whole bunch of very rare and hard to find CD-ROMs of him and rehearsals and practices and all sorts of shit, which I didn't really get into. But this is called The Audacious Inevitable, and he had this on the shelf, and that's the name of the band, and it's called Fakes. And I've had this on my want list for quite some time. It was released in 2016. And this is pretty sort of alternative, undergroundy sort of stuff. So yeah, that's another one off my want list. And finally, finally, because I'm prattling on a bit, but just the last of my last video, I showed a whole bunch of Neil Youngs that I'm catching up with, and 2 more have arrived, and then I find there's more that I haven't got my hands on yet, and I need to get hold of soon. So bloody hell, Neil Young is very prolific, not so much of new music, but with the reissues and the live stuff. So this is Earth. This is a 3 LP set of live recordings, I believe, from Promises of the Real. This is pretty good. Yeah, I'm enjoying this. Yeah, really cool. So yeah, filling in more holes in my Neil. I had to get this one through Discogs. It had to come from all the way from Europe or somewhere like that, but I managed to land it for a reasonable price. And again, this one I had to get this one shipped from overseas. This is a record day release, I believe, wasn't it? So Roxy, like Tonight's the Night live. Yeah, that's damn good, because Tonight's the Night is a bloody good LP. So yeah, another live. It's this Crazy Horse. Don't know. So yeah, lots of Neil Young coming in, and so I've still got to pick up that El Dorado, and there is another Promises of the Real LP that's come out I haven't got, which I did see in the shop, but it was quite pricey. So yeah, that's quite a stack of records, but that's been over the last month or so. But I do have a few in the mail, so they'll be here soon, and I shall move along and carry on with my day. So happy hunting next time. See you next time.